really talking about today. Yeah.
Hello everybody and welcome to another What Are We Talking About review. Today we are talking about Inferno Squadron, Battlefront 2, the novel. It's going to lead into the... Well, I don't know how much it's going to lead into the game, but the main character of the novel is the main character of the story mode on Battlefront 2. And this story, it kind of gives you an introduction to the Inferno Squad, why they exist, who made them, that kind of sort of a thing, who the members... and it shows a couple of missions that they go on, and one pretty big, their first really big mission. And by the way, this is going to be a spoilers review. So, spoiler alert. Not yet, but eventually there will be spoilers, so just, if you haven't read it, don't watch this. This book starts during episode 4, and it has the main character, Versio, on the Death Star, and she's a TIE pilot, so she gets on her TIE and she's out fighting the rebels, and you see a strike on the Death Star from the other side, and it shows that the Imperials were kind of confused as to what the rebels were even doing, because they had no idea that this was going to happen, which also ties into Rogue One. Like, this is the first book that I can think of that directly tied, like, it's so closely tied to both Rogue One and Episode 4, because it completely mentions, she knows that the attack on Jeddah was by the Death Star. She was on the Death Star when that happened. She was raised by Imperials, Versio. Her father is an Imperial admiral, and, well, at least after the Death Star's destruction, he becomes an admiral. And her mother is a famous propaganda artist for the Imperials. And so she was raised Imperial, and she's a firm believer in the Imperial beliefs. But anyways, so you carry on, and it goes through the destruction of the Death Star. She was in a TIE at the time of the destruction, so she was safe. She crash lands on the actual moon of Yavin, where the rebel base is. She sneaks, gets a rebel ship, flies away, ends up getting back to the Empire. And then, of course, there's some shuffling around, because a lot of the higher-ups were on the Death Star when it blew, including Grand Moff Tarkin. And so her father got that admiral promotion. She was promoted as well to, I believe, captain at the time. And yeah, so then right around then was when they made this Inferno Squadron after the destruction of the Death Star. And it was made up of Iden. There was the two guys, and I'm forgetting their names, but there was the other girl as well, and her name is Seb or something like that. And the girl was good at forging, and she was a linguist and stuff like that. And then one of the guys was an engineer, I believe. And yeah, like, they were each specialized, and it became this Imperial task force that was used to do special missions. And so they had a couple of small little things, almost training, and then the first big mission that they were going to do, which was like really important, and it was the first big thing. All the other ones were almost training, like I said. And so they are going to face off, and this is getting into almost spoilers. Not really spoilers, but it's going to start to be like, you don't want to hear this unless you've read the book. So it gets into where she and the squad each individually go into their own way of getting into this rebel squadron, who it's Saw Gerrera's former group, or at least followers of his former group, almost extremists that believe Saw to be this ultimate figure of what it means to be like a guardian of the universe or of the galaxy, kind of a thing, standing up for what's right, even to the extreme point. They have bombs on them in every mission just in case they need to suicide bomb, that kind of thing. Like, it's showing the extremist forms of the rebels, and like, it gives you a good... This book is really good at showing you the other side, and it makes you see how it's possible to be an Imperial and not be evil and think you're doing the right thing. And you could see the rebels as an extreme terrorist organization. They killed millions of people on the Death Star. One thing that they do in this book is that doesn't fully make sense is that she tricks you're tricked at a point, because Iden Versio pretends to renounce the Empire and claim that she thinks because of what happened on Alderaan that she no longer can be an Imperial or whatever, and she says she would like that the Emperor should be killed or something like that. And basically, to me, when that happened, I was like, oh, okay, this is getting interesting. But then that was just a fake out, and it turns out she was just using it to get into this organization, which made sense for the story. And it makes sense for the character, because she's still going to be an Imperial in the future, in the Battlefront 2 game, and that we've seen from the trailer that clearly takes place around the time of Return of the Jedi. So that means she clearly had to survive. She was still going to be an Imperial, but that's just an interesting thing to know. Like, there could be this, you're an Imperial and you believe what the rebels are doing is terroristic, or is that a word? Anyways, you believe the rebels are clearly in the wrong because they're like blowing up the Death Star, which is full of just innocent people going and doing their job. And you can still be torn because the Empire also destroyed Alderaan, and their excuse is that the planet was basically a rebel planet, and I don't know, it's just a show of force basically. And I don't know, as somebody who has watched the movies, and clearly they intend to make you see from the hero's point of view and the rebel's point of view, it's interesting to see this opposite side. And it's kind of a story about the Empire winning in the end. And it's even though there's an Imperial that dies, and again, shouldn't be listening to this if you have not read the book. But the girl dies. She sacrifices herself, basically putting herself onto Iden's sword in order to convince people that Iden is not a rebel spy, and to show that she was, Imperial spy amongst the rebels. And it was a pretty interesting thing that I did not expect. They did a good job of setting up, not only just, I didn't expect it to happen overall in the story, but then in the scene, they set it up good and made it a surprise, because the way that Iden is facing the other way, and she could just tell somebody lunged at her, so she kind of like goes to attack the person, and it turns out to be her friend, and so she has to hold it together and be like, oh, this is a good thing, but really she's breaking up inside because this is somebody that, you know, she's trained with for a long time. And I don't know, it's quite an interesting book, and it's like I said, a really interesting way to see the other side of things. And it gets me really excited to play the game, because I'd like to see where this Inferno squad picks up, especially Iden Versio. She's a really interesting character, especially with this Imperial lineage. She's almost like, not Imperial royalty, but in a way. And her main characteristic is that she is trying, like, both her father and herself do not allow the fact that her father has this high position to get her into another high position. She has to do it through her own hard work and determination, and not just through nepotism, which is something that's really cool. And it's not just she's a spoiled kid that because her father's this famous dude and her mother's this famous woman, that it makes it so that she gets to be high ranking. No, she's not treated more special because of it. In fact, sometimes she's treated worse because of it. And that's interesting. Like, that's kind of like when I was younger, we'd play hockey, and lots of times there's two different kinds of hockey coaches. Sometimes there's the coach who would favor their kid, and then that kid was usually a douche. But then there was the coaches who were a little more harsh on their kid, and it made that kid usually go on to higher levels of hockey. Sometimes it's not necessarily good to push a kid that much, but it clearly works sometimes, and in this case it did as well. She goes above and beyond to perform her duty, and in the end they do win, even though they lose one of their members. And so it is kind of, in a way, a book where the bad guy wins, even though the bad guy's the good guy in this book. But I will score this book overall as a 8.5 out of 10. It was a really good, it didn't blow me away or anything, but it was a really solid book. Quite interesting. I love the character, and it does get me excited for Battlefront 2 going forward, because finally we're getting a story mode, a canon story mode in the video games in Star Wars. I'm excited. What about you guys? Are you excited for Battlefront 2, the video game? Do you think this novel tie-in for a video game is kind of weird, or do you think it's a good way to promote both the book and the game? What did you think of the book, if you're still at this point listening? or just didn't care about listening to it. Did you like the book or not? I'd like to know all those thoughts in the comments section. And if, you want to, if you enjoyed this video, click the like button, click the subscribe button for more. And until next time, never stop reading. Peace.
And something big happens in the news. See, that's us. What are we talking about? So what are we talking about?